the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
and I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity. Thank you.
You want to sign that?
Thank you.
Special.
So we have the approval of the minutes from the June 23rd Planning Commission City Council work session. And I'm going to do these together. The approval of the minutes from the June 23rd, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. Do we have any changes or additions that planning commissioners have or need to make to those? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for the two meetings that were listed.
Commissioner Barris has made a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Summercorn, we'll just do a general vote all at once.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. First item on the agenda tonight is a preliminary plat subdivision approval for Hinckley lot split for Clint Taylor located at approximately 815 North Brookshire Drive. And I'll turn time over to staff.
All right. So yes, this evening we have a preliminary plat subdivision application for the what they're calling the Hinckley lot split. The applicants are Clint and Nicole Taylor. I believe they are here this evening. So if the commission has any questions for them later on, you can ask them. The address of the property is 815 North Berkshire Drive. The zoning is R18. The current lot size is 0.63 acres. There is, as of now, a single-family dwelling on the lot, and the subdivision would create a second lot, so there would be two lots. The lot sizes, one lot is 11,969 square feet, and the other lot is 15,254 square feet. As you are aware, in the R18 zone, they have to be a minimum size of 8,000 square feet. So the lots do meet the minimum square footage requirement. This slide just shows an aerial photo of where the existing lot is on Berkshire Drive. And then this shows the two lots that are being created. One from the, as we said, the existing single-family home, and then there will be a second lot. Staff has reviewed this along with the engineering, and we recommend that the preliminary plat be approved, subject to the conditions in the staff report. There are a couple of minor things that needed to be changed. The title of the plat needed to add addresses, and I think there was one more, but we felt that was adequate enough to bring forward the preliminary plat approval. So I'll answer any questions.
Anybody, any commissioner have any questions for staff?
I do. Melinda, just looking over the preliminary plat, I noticed there are a few things missing. I think you've mentioned some of those. Can I make a suggestion that we, as part of the conditions approval, just add a note, a catch-all note that says other corrections as may be needed per staff review?
Sure.
I've got a few suggestions for you. You may have them, may not, but I can send them into your, and then you can, but if you have that in there, it doesn't limit you to not having found other stuff.
Sounds good to me.
Is the applicant here, or do we want to?
And I suppose for the good of the public that's here, subdivision is essentially kind of a checkbox type of an application. Once all of the requirements of the zoning, the lot size, the lot widths, once those are all met, the Planning Commission recommends approval, the City Council recommends approval. This isn't a situation where we approve or deny. It's once you meet all those requirements, the subdivision legally has to be approved. So we just have to go through the process to make sure that the lots that are created meet all the requirements that are set forth in the zoning code. So,
Does the applicant have anything they want to add? Thank you.
I had one other question.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Paul.
The setback from the existing gazebo to the property line, I can't read that, but I'm assuming as an accessory structure, that's pretty minimal and it meets code?
It is 5 feet. I don't read on there.
Yeah, usually with an accessory structure, it's, depending on city, it's 3 to 5 feet.
It's hard to read on there, but on the thing, it does say 5 feet.
Okay.
I don't remember what the minimum was. I know it's less than that on an accessory.
And the gazebo is not attached to the main structure, correct?
No.
In any way?
No.
Okay.
No, just
Okay.
concrete.
It's just a technical thing.
Yeah.
I looked at a lot of plats, so I kind of,
We actually in Kaysville will go as few as 1 foot off the
Yeah.
property line, as
Yeah.
long as the stormwater can be kept on the property.
yeah, and usually it's also a building code issue as well with the
Yes.
fire
Firewall.
protection, yeah.
Okay. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move, make a motion to recommend for approval the preliminary site plat subdivision for the Hinckley lot split for Clint Taylor located at 1850 North Brookshire Drive as explained by staff in the report.
And
Do you want to add the condition that Commissioner Allred suggested as well?
And any assistant conditions as deemed necessary by the city staff.
I'll second it based on the additional comment from commission and staff review.
Cool, we'll start with Jared.
Aye.
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 Aye,
Aye.
Aye.
and it passes. That passes on to city council.
Yeah, so the next step, we'll get this on the city council agenda probably August 4th, but we'll let you know. And it's usually a fairly similar conversation, not very many comments. And then the next phase will be the final plat approval, which just comes back to the planning. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is public hearing for the rezone application from B Builders for 602 South Angel Street from A1 Light Agricultural District to R1 14 Single Family Residential District with a PRUD Planned Unit Residential Overlay. And I'll turn that over to staff.
Right, this may seem familiar to you all. We have another application from B Builders from the Johnson Trust. You'll recall that, I think it was April, we heard this, actually it was May 12th. We heard this, it was an application for R18 that ultimately failed at the city council. And so they are back before us today with an application for R114. So the property is 602 South Angel Street. It's 1.66 acres. There is a single-family dwelling on the property right now. It is zoned A1. Based on the minimum square footage required in lot on A1 zoning, they could only have one single-family dwelling there. The requested zoning to go to R114 has a minimum lot size requirement of 14,000 square feet. So with that, they would be able to fit up to 5 single-family dwellings, should the zoning be approved. Here's just an aerial shot of the property located there on Angel Street. This next slide just shows a further zoomed out view. Here is a view of the property, just looking at the front of the property, and then the zoning map that shows there is a variety of zoning in the vicinity. You have everything from A5 to A1, RA, some R120, and then R1LD. So one of the questions that typically comes up when we talk about a rezone is the differences between the two zones, the existing zone and the zone that they're requesting to go to. So as far as uses, there's really not difference. It would be single-family residential, and then there are some differences between A1. The main one is the minimum lot square footage requirement, which Again, right now is 40,000. It would be reduced to 14,000 square feet. Based on that, only one lot could exist with the zoning that is present. 5 could possibly be fit if the rezone was approved. The minimum lot width is 10 feet less on the R114, so 90 feet. The front setbacks are the same. Side setback is slightly less as well on R114 at 8 feet. Rear setback is 15 feet. That is less than the A1, and then the maximum building height is the same actually for all of our residential zones, so the 30 feet there. B Builders did submit a concept plan with the application that shows 4 dwelling units. Again, off of the PRED, they would have a private street. And so even though, the zoning entitlement on the density, if it's approved, they would allow 5. But what they're showing with this is just the 4. So when we look to whether or not we should rezone a property, what we really want to refer back to is our general plan information, the goals and objectives in our general plan. This is, for the most part, a repeat of what we went through with the R18 zoning, but with a slightly different lens. So our 2019 general plan is the one that the council has adopted. We have been working on a general plan update, but council has not adopted that yet. As such, because the 2019 plan is the one that's adopted, that's the one I will reference for my staff report and staff recommendations. But one of the primary goals or content of the 2019 plan is that Kaysville wants to remain a primary residential community. So this rezone is a residential rezone, so that fits within that goal. And there's also a goal that talks about growth and development and refers to trying to diversify growth that's high quality and adaptable to changing conditions. So one of the, I think, biggest changing conditions that we have in Utah, in Kaysville certainly, is the housing market, the affordability of housing, and the affordability of larger lots versus smaller lots is something to consider. So I think that with those 2 points, their general plan does have information that warrants consideration of the zone change. We have also in the plan a section specific to housing that talks about type of housing we would like to see west of the I-15. I think it was actually pointed out at the city council meeting last week. I think probably one of the primary reasons that language exists is because most of the developable land that we have left is on the west side of I-15. But it talks about, keeping higher density, whether it's smaller single-family lots or what's defined here as medium density on major streets. I would consider Angel Street to be a major street, so the location of this property does fit within that. And then there's a point that speaks about trying to provide a variety of housing choices throughout the community, and a means for allowing homes of a variety of sizes. So given that and having some, slightly smaller lots than what exists over there, I think that is a good point to consider with the goals of the general plan and the consideration of rezoning this to R114. There's also the last part in the general plan that I'll cover. There is a call for additional moderate income housing, and trying to define that is difficult, maybe even laughable at this point in Utah, with considering how expensive I was just in meetings all day today in Wasatch County and Midway, and the average home price in Wasatch County is $975,000. So that's actually probably comparable with here in Kaysville. We might be slightly higher than that, but so it's difficult to try and paint any situation that would seem that it's affordable or more affordable. But nonetheless, we do have these notions in the plan, and I think it's very easy to meet the argument that having a smaller size lot is more affordable than a larger size lot. So there is, a call to zone for properties that would allow for more moderate and less costly lot size and building. Those 3 points there I've listed on the slide. And then another one too, number 4, when we look at adding a PRUD overlay into the rezone, what that does is it allows a developer to deviate from the traditional city standards that we require on roads that are going to be public roads. So the PRUD overlay essentially would allow this property to have a private road, and that means that, maybe they don't put sidewalks in, which is allowing for a more cost-efficient method of construction. Roads would tend to be more narrow instead of the full width that we require on public roads, where we know we have to get snow plows in and all sorts of maintenance vehicles in. So the PRUD overlay does also support having the plan for additional moderate income housing. I also just want to let the council and the public know we are required by law to send out public hearing notices anytime a property is being considered for a rezone. In this particular property, we mailed out 31 notices. Kaysville goes above and beyond what the state law requires, which is 300 feet. We mailed those out to a 500-foot radius of the property. We received far fewer comments this time around than we did on the first application. I think we've only received 4 comments. We had well over 20 on the last one. One of the comments had concerns about connectivity and public safety access. I think I did copy you on my response back to that individual, but a lot of this we don't address at this stage of the development process. And a good example of why is because, as we saw with the R18 rezone application, it didn't go through. So once the zoning is set, that's when we really get into the details of how do we connect roads. Do we connect roads? Is that even possible? This would be a private road, again, so we wouldn't address that. Although we do like to generally see connectivity through neighborhoods. I think it makes better traffic patterns, make better neighborhoods. But some of those questions that came to us at this time were just questions that we're not able to answer. Another comment came in, there still feels like the 14,000 square foot lots is too dense given this area of the city. But again, there was a lot less opposition this time around than what we received with the previous application. The applicant is here today and they submitted some slides. So that is all I had prepared for the Planning Commission. I can address any questions you have right now, or we can turn the time over to the applicant, whatever your preference is.
I think we'll turn time over to the applicant and then we'll go from there. Please state your name.
David Nielsen with B Builders, representing the Johnson Trust. I don't see a lynching mob today, so I'm a little more comfortable, I suppose. Go to the next slide. I mean, this meets everything that we have in the neighborhood. 2 of the lots are exactly what's in the neighborhood. In the city council meeting just the other day, there was an R14 approved less than a mile away from this on Angel Street. So unless the Planning Commission has questions for me, I think I'd just ask you for a vote, and ask you to look at it for what it is and for the comments that we got back.
Do any commission members have any questions for the applicant? Okay.
I'm just curious, like, where it's going from like the 8 you proposed before to the 4, like, are there going to be the same type of houses, or
No,
are you
not
changing?
at all. They'll be full price customs. They can't afford to do anything else on
Sure.
them.
So what's the price point you're anticipating?
We'll probably be, on the smaller ones, we'll probably be around $1 million. On the bigger ones, probably 1.5, 1.7.
Okay.
So
Cool.
it doesn't meet the goal of affordability because the lot sizes don't do it.
Nobody else has questions?
I have a question for staff. Is this, or the applicant, is this a private road that comes down in, or do
Yes.
we extend
This
we
would
don't
be-
extend a public road down in there, right?
No.
Okay,
This
good.
will be a private road, and it will not connect to the Angel Crest Way in the back. So there will not be any more foot traffic for school children back to Angel Crest Way.
Great.
Cool.
Thank you.
There's no further questions.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. At this time, we will open it up for public hearing. Please keep your comments brief. If somebody says something prior to what you said and you agree with it, we would appreciate you just agreeing with it, and we'll be done. So this time, we'll just open it for public hearing. Come forward, Mr. Taylor. It's good to see you tonight.
It's great to see you guys too.
State your name and
Justin
address.
Taylor. I didn't love my experience here last time. I didn't want to come back tonight, but I love the plan, and I didn't have time to write an email, so I'm here to voice my support for this. I want to show where I live. If you don't mind pulling up the map,
Do you need a pointer?
where I can just run over.
Here's your, okay.
Well, it's right here. So, right here, and I have a view of this house, and I love the Johnson family. I am gonna miss their annual family party that they have all the pop-ups in their yards, and it will be sad to see such a place go away. But I'm grateful for the communication and the coordination, and I really like this new plan, so I owed it to this family to come here tonight and support this, so thank you.
Thank you. If there's any more public comments, then I'm going to close the public hearing. Planning Commission. What's your thoughts?
Well, one thought I have is, when we saw this last time, we supported this 4-2, which would have given us a much more affordable price point, which unfortunately, in my opinion, got turned down. We've had a lot of instances on the east side of Kaysville where we've approved a higher density development, not many on the west side, and there's some feelings on that. So I'm sad to see that we got a price point over $1 million when we could have had something more affordable that would reach out to a lot higher percentage of people that could afford what was presented. But I'm very supportive of this plan, but it's unfortunate the last plan got turned down, in my opinion.
I'll echo my support for the previous comments and say I wholeheartedly agree. And I think it's, just on a personal note, I moved out to the west side of Kaysville 25 years ago. And to sit here in a meeting tonight where we're talking about $1 million or $1.5 million just blows my mind. And I think it really highlights how quickly things can change. 5 years ago, none of us would have believed we'd be sitting here tonight talking about those kinds of values. So I think it behooves us as a planning commission and as a city to look at these kinds of requests and, if at all possible, to make reasonable recommendations to support any kind of housing that helps with the situation we have.
I can't really add anything else. I would just say Jared well said. That's exactly how I feel as well.
Motion. I'll float a motion to approve to recommend approval to the city council, the rezone, as per the staff report, and with some additional findings. And I welcome any comments on the findings I'm going to put forward. Number one, finding of fact is that this proposal will provide a slightly different and a greater variety of housing choice with a lot size that is uncharacteristic overall of the west side. The proposal does no harm to the general public in terms of infrastructure. It complies with the general plan. It partly goes toward addressing the housing crisis. That if there were strong opposition to this project tonight based on the general plan, I would say that the general plan is advisory, but furthermore that this proposal complies with the general plan and should be supported. And overall, the land use pattern on the west side of Kaysville is pretty much already set. We're not going to be able to change the stripes. We're a zebra pretty much on the west side. And this one little project is not going to affect that overall pattern. And also finding a fact that the extreme housing costs and rising interest rates really behooves us again to look at these kinds of proposals to support, and that the R114 zone is too dense in my opinion. But having said that, it's the minimum we can do is support this. And finally, that the private road development reduces a burden upon taxpayers in terms of infrastructure. So with those comments, I would recommend we approve the rezone as put forth.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Krista, we'll start with you.
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. That will be up on the, next step for this is to the city council.
Yes, this will go to city council, probably for the August 4th. Yeah. Don't anticipate anything that would change that, so it should be August 4th as well. 7 o'clock, same place, so. All right,
All
so
right.
next then.
Call the public. We have no public. We will close that.
Ice cream
And-
place is open.
And we will move on to other matters that properly come before the Planning Commission.
Yes. Well, welcome, Krista, to your first meeting.
Thank you.
I'm sure you're feeling a little bit like a fish out of water.
Yes.
We will work to getting you to a better comfort level. But I know Krista took some time to watch a few training videos.
Including the one about this. Yes.
Yes.
Learned a lot. Lots of passion.
Yes, appreciate
So,
that.
so she could qualify and vote, right?
Exactly, yes. State law requires that planning commissioners, I think, have an hour of training. Was that 2 years ago that went into place?
Yeah, I think so.
Ish.
2 years, maybe. Yeah, 2 years. 3.
Which is kind of funny because they don't require that of elected officials that actually make the decision, but nonetheless.
But the Utah League does have a manual called Now You're Elected.
Yes.
It's about, what, about
Yes.
100 pages?
Kind of like now what?
Yes, now what do you do? You made all these promises.
So land use is one of the most complex things that the city does, and your role as planning commissioners is very important. I many times as staff feel inadequate for the job that I have to do as well. So you're not alone. I just had to do an annexation that I've never been through an annexation before. I think we got it right.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Was that from Mutton Hollow?
No.
It
at the
was,
end of Oxford.
Oxford, okay.
yes, yeah, it's like 765 Oxford, very end of Oxford. Just 1.14 acre portion of property that the LPM Corporation / Kingston's own. Yeah. So, but one of the things, so our other commissioner, Rachel Lott, is out of town in July. She'll be back, or she'll be with us in August. So one of the things that I had talked with the Planning Commission a couple months ago about was going back, looking at our bylaws, doing some revisions to the bylaws. I feel like it was a little bit, timing would have been better to wait till we had our new commissioners to do that. So that'll be one thing that we'll be doing. We need to look at a couple other things. I know Wolf had mentioned our appeal process needs some work. I will not be here on the 28th. I will be in the middle of the Sawtooths without any way to communicate with anyone. Then in August, we'll get some more items in front of you, but I think we will be able to get the general plan adopted by the City Council. I'm guessing also the August 4th meeting.
Can I ask a quick question on, well, if you're going to be looking at bylaws, with our experience going through COVID, can we make sure that, that it's up to date for doing online meetings? I know we put some stuff in there for electronic meetings, but ensuring that electronic voting and electronic meetings is covered thoroughly and adequately so that under state law, is it section 52, that we're covered for emergency meetings and such. I just want to make sure that moving forward that we can do that like we should, but also that moves forward in a manner that's codified in the bylaws better.
Yep, we can look at that. There were several things that, one of the things that if we were to have an appeal of a decision the Planning Commission made, we want to make sure that anything that was submitted into the record for consideration is included in that appeal. Oftentimes, individuals will come in the night of a meeting and hand the council or the Planning Commission information that they would like to have considered, and I don't know if right here at the diocese isn't enough time to accept that into the record and have it considered as part of the record. So we may want to place a deadline on having anything other than your public comments. If you were to have anything submitted, whether it's photos or a traffic study or traffic data, you may want to have some type of a timeline on when that's going to be submitted. There are some, I think, kind of technical things that we could do to make sure our process is one that benefits the job that you have to do.
And I'll just make a comment. I'm doing a review on 9 projects for my job for land entitlement. And I'm going through, this is across the U.S. from Massachusetts all the way into Texas, and looking at planning commissions and boards of zoning, as they're called in other states. Almost all of them have requirements like this that has to be in before. You can't hand anything to the commissioners at the meeting. I don't know what the mood is, but I almost feel like that's a better process in some regards. Almost all of them everyone requires drawings, engineered drawings or architectural drawings. I think we see that here, but I think a more robust process in some regards, so that we're getting the right information, so that if an appeal does happen, it's not, well, I handed this to the person on the night of.
Yeah, and I know that can be frustrating to the public, but we had an instance, I think it was in February with the community garden, but night of the meeting, something was handed to the chair. It never made its way to staff, and then there was members of the public that were upset because it wasn't included as part of the public record. And so, so I think we can just make our process a little bit more transparent. And obviously we put those guidelines or those bylaws on the website so that people could know when people call in, or we can put that information in the public hearing notices that we send out. But so those are some of the things that we would anticipate working on within the next couple of months as time allows. Kind of also just depends on how many applications come in and how many applications we have to process, and so we're trying to balance that.
Tell me again what was happening with the appeals process change?
Well, we need to get an appeals process in place that meets state code. So that's one thing that I just have not had time to do much on. So trying to think if there's really anything else, but I would anticipate, so, there was another thing I wanted to show you tonight as well, but the discussion last week with the City Council on the general plan did go well. I think there's essentially just a few more kind of wordsmithing things that we need to do. There were a couple of maps or renderings that I think the council wanted to have taken out, but I think we're pretty much there. And we should have that. My goal is to get that on the August 4th City Council meeting agenda for adoption. And then another thing that we'll want to talk about going forward is now that Kaysville would have really kind of like effectively its first full-fledged general plan, when a rezone comes in and it doesn't meet what that, I was being diplomatic. When a rezone comes in and it doesn't meet what the future land use map shows, how do we want to go through that process? Do we want to do a general plan amendment? I talked briefly about this with Will today. I talked with Paul about this yesterday. There's some philosophical approaches to that, but that's something that we'll need to get put into place. So in relation to the two, I think kind of the biggest questions that were left with the general plan were those two properties that we're actually asking to have the future land use map show. The Flint property just north of Smith's, the council didn't want to change that at this point in time. I think that there's members of the council that agree that that would be a good use to have that property shown as mixed use, but I think the consensus was that at this point in the process it would be disingenuous to change that. The Symphony Homes that was further south out by the Equestrian Center, I don't think that there's agreement that that would be a good change to make, but they felt like at this point in time they just wanted to leave the future land use map as it had been.
I think we can 350.
And then the other thing that I wanted to just, let's see, is this gonna, no, it's not. How am I gonna get this to show? Let me just read it to you. So at the last meeting, we talked about the explosives ordinance, and we had the member of the public. This is kind of one of the cool things about the public process is that, you know, there was someone that saw that, read through it and said, hey, this might impact one of the hobbies that I had. So the cool thing about a democratic process, right, it worked in this case, I think. So he came in, expressed some concerns. The Planning Commission talked about that and gave direction to staff to go back and do a little bit more homework. We'll take a final ordinance to the City Council next week at the July 21st meeting. But we did, I met with our building official, worked with the fire chief and the city attorney, and the language that we came up was to add a letter D to the exception section that just says commercially manufactured black powder intended to be used for rocket motors solely in compliance with the state of Utah's currently adopted edition of the International Fire Code and in compliance with the NFPA 1122 code for model rocketry. So we did.
Way to go, staff.
Yeah,
That's cool.
I watched all that online and I read some, like that's a pretty cool solution.
You know,
That's awesome.
it
It's
was
so easy to say
it was
hard
interesting when
stop,
he
no.
stood up because I didn't know where he was going to go, and I think it was appropriate he was here because that was an item that, you know, was kind of within bounds to discuss.
Yeah. I mean, you know, sometimes this process is just really cumbersome and bureaucratic. But sometimes it's really cool to see how the process really can evolve and change. And, you know, and in this case, it's like we had a resident that came forward with a concern. We've worked then as staff to address it, and then that final recommendation will be what goes to the city council, and I would assume that it will be adopted. Obviously, that's not the same sentiment that Mr. McGraw, who was opposed to this, that he would have, but that's also just how it plays out sometimes. So some good work. So thanks for the Planning Commission to kind of entrusting staff to get that language right and keep it moving forward through the process versus having to bring it back and schedule another public hearing. So that's really all I have. Mindy, is there anything you have?
Upcoming calendar?
I got a comment. Mindy, or Melinda,
M&M.
yes, I just want to say thank you for, again, the agenda looks great. The staff reports are really easy to follow. I like the fact that you're not sticking them full of jargon and stuff, so that anybody who's reading it, whether they're out in the audience and don't know a lot about zoning, or some of us planning commissioners who don't know the code inside and out, we get a really good snapshot of it with just enough information without too much. And the other thing is, I appreciated the phone call just to, you know, bounce ideas. I have found that when staff is talking to the planning commission and or council members, you know, things really go well. So I applaud you for reaching out and just saying, hey, what do you think about this, or what do you think about that? So I just say good on you for doing that. And I just, you know, any help you might need, great.
Well, we're fortunate to have some subject matter experts on our planning commission, and some people that have a lot of years of experience in this under their belts and in different communities. But I know Steve's done a lot of this too, so that's, you know, many minds will make a better product in the end. That's all I have.
So currently, there's not a hard stop in terms of submitting a request before the meeting, or what's the, like, for
Meaning-
residents? Like, this was helpful, we got the email, you followed up with this hard copy,
Oh.
and you gave education, and it's super helpful, even being new to all the
Sure.
different zoning stuff. Like, oh, I remember reading about that, I remember hearing, so it was super helpful in terms of preparation, and then to get here and get a hard copy. So if someone were just to come up, is there not right now protocols on how that would work?
No, there is, and so, you know, generally, a lot of times what comes in with our public comments is just people expressing opinions versus asking questions. With the case of this one that came in earlier this week, I felt like it was important to follow up with the citizen and just say, look, we got this, but we really just don't have answers yet. And it can be really, you know, unintuitive to be like, well, then how can you rezone it if you don't have answers to these questions? But, you know, there's various steps in the process where, you know, essentially when the time is right, now they'll go start spending a lot of money on engineering and figuring out the answers to those questions. And then that's when we as staff, we look at it, make sure that, you know, that there wouldn't be any, to the greatest way that we can, that there wouldn't be any negative impacts to, you know, stormwater or to connectivity.
The boreal toad that lives down the street.
The what?
The boreal toad that lives on your property.
Yes, that.
Do your NEPA assessment.
Do they? I don't know.
No, I've got one in
On this property?
in Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I mean, so again, land use is very complex, but sometimes when people do come here and they may have a question, and I kind of leave that to the chair to decide whether or not they would like us to address a question or respond. But this really is, when we hold a public hearing, which we have to for rezone, it's really their time to just speak their mind and give their opinion of the matter. Sometimes it's appropriate to have more of a dialogue or to answer questions. Sometimes it's not, because their questions really are just more opinions or thoughts. But you know, we'll try and address those, I think, as it's appropriate. And like I said, with this one, I felt like it was good to just get back with them and say, hey, don't know yet. So let's see, there was something else that I was going to say, but it's kind of escaped me. But it's you know, the feedback, the comments from the public, sometimes it does make a difference into the outcome.
As far as getting on the agenda, is there a set timeline?
Yeah, so good question, and it kind of depends on the application, but by law, if there's a public hearing that has to be scheduled, like for this evening with the Johnson property, we have to have a public notice mailed no less than 10 days before the date of the meeting.
Okay.
And so that means really we've got to have an application in hand 3 weeks at least before the next planning commission meeting date, because we've got to pull addresses, we've got to format the public hearing, we've got to get the labels made and get things mailed out. So so generally speaking, I think really within 3 or 4 weeks we can work something into an agenda. Just depends on, you know, when the next meeting date is, but that's the trickiest thing, is when we have to send those public hearing notices out. And then for the text amendments, those also have to have a public hearing notice posted at least 10 days before the meeting, but we don't have to mail them out, so that's a little easier to do those. The other thing that I was going to just say is I appreciate Councilmember Allred including kind of his findings or his reasonings for wanting to make a motion, and that's something that I'd like to work into and build up to, as well as to provide those findings of facts to the Planning Commission and to the council, as to, I mean, that's really like, here's the reasons why you're making the decision. Some of those findings of facts I think are fairly intuitive, you know, like general plan calls for this, it supports that. Other times there may be more findings of facts that come at light in the course of the meeting or the public hearing. But in general, the best land use decisions are made when you have facts to point to. And so that's, I think, what Commissioner Allred was trying to do this evening, was say, here's the findings of facts. And I haven't specifically called those out in the staff reports, but I would like to work into having a section of findings of facts in the staff reports within, you know, probably the next 4 to 6 months. So.
Does our planning commission get a heads up about the state conference, the APA conference? Are they invited? Do we invite our planning commission to go? Is there money for training, annual training?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there were several planning commissioners, I think, that went last year. I wasn't here with Kaysville last year. Okay, but is it in Harriman?
It wasn't 10.
Lehigh.
Lehigh.
Oh, okay.
Lehigh, September 8th and 9th.
Okay,
for
and
the
then the Utah Land Use Institute, there's one in
That's
Sandy.
at the end of October.
Okay,
It's
yeah, so
October
there's 2
25th and
opportunities.
26th. And then, of course, there's the league conference,
Yeah.
which is, I think, October 5th and 6th, 5th, 6th, and 7th, something like that.
The reason I ask is because Krista being new, it's a great opportunity sometimes for new planning commissioners to feel oriented pretty quickly, especially if they can rub shoulders with people from their own community and say, hey, I need to know more about this. They can go to a particular training session.
Yep.
And so.
We'll get that information out to the commission and
Yeah,
see,
thank
you know, it's certainly not a requirement. There will be some good opportunities between the 3. 4 hours?
Mhm.
Okay.
It's required for all commissioners, for all of us.
And we also, there's a requirement to have your open and public meetings training as well. The council is going to have that next Thursday on the 21st. So I was going to send out an email to the planning commission to say, hey, if you want to come, you're more than welcome. We can also schedule that. Nick's happy to come and do that for
Yeah, that
us
would be good.
individually, which might
Smart.
be,
Do it, Johnny. Check that box.
yeah, might be a better option with some, maybe we'll get that scheduled in August when Rachel's back. But yeah, there is a lot of training, but also some great opportunities. So we'll get that information out. We have a very modest budget for the travel and the. Oh, I'm not. I'm just saying in general we do. We have a very modest budget that, but we're happy to get you the training that's required and.
It can really build confidence quite
For
quickly.
sure.
Because new planning commissioners that come on board sometimes feel really inadequate. And.
Or do
so
I don't
now-
feel really inadequate, I just feel like I.
It's okay, Paul, you're not inadequate.
Yeah. Yeah.
We trust you, Paul.
Maybe it's
There's,
because I don't know very much, so I'm like
yeah.
overly confident, and then I'll get
Yeah.
rocked.
Well, the great news, Chris, is just when you feel like you've learned it, the legislature will
The
change
state legislature
laws.
the legislature goes into session in January,
that's funny.
in
Yeah.
February, and they make big changes.
Yeah. All right, anything else? What? Oh, there we go.
Motion to
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
So moved.